Please be seated.
Mr. Harvey.
Your Honours, just before the break, I had begun to address a couple of issues in reply to a question of the presiding judge on Lahi Brahimai's presence in or absence from Jablanica. And if Your Honours have to hand our final brief, page 11, beginning at paragraph 21, we do set this out in some detail, pointing out that in 1998, Lahi was then 28 years old and already a member of the General Staff, working inside the country. We cite at paragraph 22 the evidence of Bislim Zerapi and Jakub Krasniqi concerning the conditions under which the General Staff operated. Krasniqi in particular at paragraph 23, saying he had even no knowledge at all of Lahi Brahimai until he actually entered the Kosovo in around June 1998 when he was appointed spokesperson, and that further down in that paragraph, members of the General Staff operated in secret, meeting irregularly at a variety of separate villages in the Berisha Mountains in Drenica. And again, 24, Mr. Krasniqi and Mr. Zerapi both confirmed that Lahi was a staff officer and as such not in a position to be in command over soldiers in the area. And I think that therefore, I hope that addresses your concerns. As I said, we do not take the absurd position that Lahi Brahimai was never in Jablanica. We simply say that logic makes it obvious that he has, in order to have discharged his responsibility, he has to have been absent frequently, and indeed that is underscored by his rapid dismissal by Mr. Haradinaj from his position as deputy head of the Dukagjin zone, because he was not attending meetings and he was outside the area. Thank you. If I may also make the point that in relation, on page 12, we take the point that Jablanica was not in and could not be in control of all of the surrounding villages. Again, drawing on what Mr. Regimatai and Mr. Zerapi said about attempting to gain control, the other very obvious point to any of us who has any knowledge, experience, background in liberation struggles and liberation movements and how they operate is that you don't win power by bullying people when you are in a relatively weak position. You have to win their hearts and minds. And the record shows that the KLA not only won the hearts and minds, it won the war. It won the respect and love of the people, as Mr. Emerson has pointed out. I just want to hit a couple of points in relation to Witness 80's more extravagant and incredible claims. Pages 15, 16, and 17 of our final brief. The suggestion that he was targeted because he was a member of the LDK, when on his own evidence he was not an office holder, he played no leading role. There's nothing to suggest that those who did play a leading role in that village were themselves targeted, which is what you might expect if there were any basis to that claim. It makes no sense, but that almost pales into significance by his claim that in 1998 he could set up a stronger army than the KLA. It frankly beggars belief that that could come out of his mouth, which was why I asked him, was he actually serious about that bizarre claim? He insisted that he was. Transcript page 2594, lines 9 through 13. And then, sometimes we as lawyers, when we put a witness on the stand, have to be very good at keeping a straight face and not letting our reactions show. And Mr. Rogers did a very good job of that when witness 80 suddenly blurted out that he had been reported to have been seen in or on top of a Serbian tank during the Serb attack on Českovo village. And when questioned by the prosecutor as to why he claims the KLA detained him, he said, allegedly someone had gone and told them that I had participated in the attack against the Českovo village and I had been seen in the tanks of the Serbian forces. That's at transcript 2416, lines 5 to 15. By the time he came to be cross-examined on this point 3 days later, he strengthens his account by improving on the him who was told or the them who were told. The accused himself, Lahi Brahimai, went all over the territory and declared that I saw the witness with my own eyes on top of Serb tanks. Again, a fatuously bizarre invention, and one that is fascinatingly close to witness 3, who testified that he was questioned himself about he, witness 3, being seen on top of a tank in Đorđević Imad. And that's at T 1566, lines 3 through 5 and following. Since both of these witnesses have had an opportunity to discuss their evidence, and since this evidence is in any event broadcast for the public to listen to or to read, we say there is every reason to treat this particular invention by witness 80 as what Mr. Guy Smith has called the theft of another man's life or another man's claim to what actually happened to be his experience. If I may turn then to the death threats which we say he claims to have been made against him. And that's at paragraph 51 of our final brief on page 21. These claims were investigated thoroughly and in detail, and the documents were shown to the witness in court so that he could react to them. They were investigated by UNMIC, who found that there was nothing to link this claim to the KLA. And as we have put it there, the secret life of witness 80 is rather like the secret life of Walter Mitty. He claims to have been everywhere, to have seen everything, but we submit these claims are based on invention, on lies, on what he's been told by others, and we have to bear in mind the potential for what may have been suggested to him as things that might help him to gain the benefits that he has received as a result of his testimony in this case. We have set out the lies, exaggerations, and inconsistencies in detail. I'm not going to rehearse that before your honours. You have it in front of you. I'm going to talk about his motives for a moment. His motivation to lie was underpinned by greed and need. He had lost his job, whether he was fired, as was suggested to him, for threatening his boss with a weapon, or whether he simply resigned, as he claimed. Either way, he was not able to continue as a sanitation worker. He was unable to get any other job in Kosovo. He was a widower with children to support, and a history of years of arms smuggling which had finally caught up with him, resulting in him facing criminal charges. So he couldn't resort to gun running to supplement his lack of income, or to make up for it. But he does have one skill, and your honours have seen it demonstrated very clearly. He is a man of considerable cunning, a man who is manipulative, and he put those skills to work in a sensational way. Ultimately, after he had used every conceivable dishonest ploy to avoid coming here to testify in The Hague, this trial chamber had an opportunity to watch that cunning in operation over a period of several days. The first thing out of his mouth was a lie. He claimed that he had a doctor's certificate stating that he should be hospitalized. When you, your honours, asked to see that supposed doctor's certificate, it turned out the doctor had ordered no such treatment. And over the ensuing days, his supposed illness staged a miraculous recovery. He grew in confidence and in combativeness, and he was skillful in evading questions that your honours may have thought he found too uncomfortable to respond to. I have a section in our final brief which goes into a lot of detail about Witness 81. And it is really tempting to say, okay, Witness 81's out of here, we don't need to consider him. I adopt everything Mr. Emerson has so ably said about why it is important to look at the way in which the prosecution sought to introduce evidence through that despicable witness, and the nature of a prosecution that seeks to rely on a witness of that caliber. But I do say, you'll be relieved to hear, that I think Mr. Emerson has said it all. I adopt every word of what he said, and the only reason I'm not going to belabor the point is it's in our brief. I do ask you to read it, and I do ask you not to accept the prosecution's invitation to say, all right, we don't need to think about this at all. The real question is what kind of a prosecution would put a witness on that, like that on in the first place. I want to turn, if I may, to the section of how this witness's testimony was obtained and elicited, together with the way in which the defence and the trial chamber were belatedly informed of the benefits already received and those yet expected by that witness, should leave the trial chamber doubting every word that came from his mouth. At the very least, if it is uncorroborated by a truly reliable source, we say the only safe approach is to reject it utterly. Mr. Rogers' suggestion that this is someone who came forward out of motives of honor would be farcical if it did not lie so inappropriately and irresponsibly in the mouth of a senior prosecutor. Your Honours, I turn to paragraphs 177 to 8 on pages 54 to 55 of our brief, because I think it's important to recall how evasive and reluctant he was to discuss what he had testified to under oath in other proceedings to immigration authorities. Confronted with the proof that he had written begging for help to the OTP investigator, he tried painfully to watch. He tried to lie his way out of it. He took shelter behind a claim that he couldn't read English, although, in fact, you yourself, Mr. President, had to admonish him on one occasion at the request of the court's interpreters not to answer questions in English. You may think that his claim that he didn't understand what he himself had written in an email, despite his denials, was an utter conspicuous lie. Like the lies that he told in order to get asylum, and when he failed in that attempt, when that asylum was denied to him, he grasped desperately at the heaven-sent opportunity to try and get support for his claim from the OTP. And despite their reluctance to admit it, that is exactly what he got. He got the most conspicuous support as an immigration attorney you could possibly hope to have in your hands, to lay before a tribunal and say, please reopen the case because we now have information that this person would face threats to his life, his family, his security if sent back. A godsend for his immigration attorney, but based, we say, on lies. Because Your Honours have had the opportunity to review what he did say to the immigration authorities in support of his asylum claim. He never said a single word about his brother being mistreated by the KLA or anybody being mistreated by the KLA. He never mentioned Jablanica. He never mentioned the Brahimais. It's important to ask why not. If it had been true, it would have been a perfectly good basis for claiming asylum. Here are these people who are accused before you of war crimes, who had already finished at the time that he was testifying in 2008, at the time that that witness stood before an immigration judge and gave his testimony, the first trial was over as far as the evidence was concerned, and as far as the final briefs were concerned, judgment had yet to be given. But what better opportunity, if there were any basis of truth in it, than to say to the immigration judge in support of my asylum claim, you should know those 3 murdering thugs who've been on trial in The Hague, those are the ones who I'm terrified of. Lahi Brahimai is the one who did terrible things to my brother. What better claim could you possibly have to put before an immigration judge? Not one word of it. Instead, he maintained that he was in fear because the Serbs killed his brother. Your Honours may recall the document that he filed in support of his claim, which purported fraudulently to have been sent from Kosovo in support of the claim that the Serbs had killed his brother. And it's noteworthy that he never made any suggestion that the KLA had done it, or indeed, of course, we know nothing about the ultimate fate of his brother. And he said that was his reason for coming forward. He hoped to find out about the ultimate fate of his brother. That may be the only true thing he said to you. But sadly, one way or another, we are no further forward in establishing that. Instead of telling what might have been thought to be a plausible claim, if there were any truth to it, he concocts this bizarre story about two rogue assassins paid by a Serbian ex-policeman who lives in Montenegro, who are trying to kill him because, as he says in what looks rather suspiciously like very coached testimony, I love a democratic Kosovo, because of his claimed support for the PDK, a party in which he never actively or concretely participated. And for all of this, Defence 192 exhibit under seal transcript page 1738 through 17.
Your Honour, you are in open session.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Mr. Harvey.
Yes, Your Honours. The only evidence that purports to
Open session. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Registrar, and you don't have to repeat yourself, Mr. Harvey. You may move on.
At pages 65 through 72 of our final brief, and I want to take you, if I may, particularly to page 65 to start with. Your Honours recall that Mr. Guy Smith has referred to a number of irreconcilable contradictions in witness 80's claims, upon which the OTP bases both counts 1 and count 6. We have set out here a series of alternative scenarios based on the evidence given by witness 80, and your honours will see we've set out 5 particular scenarios. Probably another 5 could easily be added to those, but we didn't want to stretch the brief out until the crack of doom. The prosecution do not know on what evidence, when the boys were taken to Jablanica. That's how Mr. Rogers put it. The reality is we do not know on the evidence whether the 3 young men were ever taken to Jablanica. And if we could bring up, I have modified Exhibit P78, which is the map that your honours had displayed to you by Mr. Emerson, that was in fact drawn by Rustem Tetay to show the various zones of command, areas of command, which are in black ink with numbers 1 through 4 on the left-hand side of the screen in front of you. On the right-hand side, I have highlighted in blue the area that was under attack, as your honours will see in a moment when we look at Exhibit P114. At the time of the Serbian army offensive that was mounted against villages around the 19th of May 1998. Your honours will see that I have highlighted 4 villages which are mentioned in Exhibit P114, which as I say, we can't put 2 exhibits on the screen at the same time, but I will mention them just to show where all of these places are in relation to each other. At the top of the large oval, as a rectangle in blue that surrounds Gravenica. Can we zoom in a little bit, Luke? Yeah, thank you. Now I can read it too. And then below to the right, Dolovo, below to the left, Cheskovo, and at the bottom, Kpuz. If, while we're here, we could also look up above to the right, we see encircled in a red oval the village of Dolch or Dolac, which is, as your honours will see, at the north east of the crossroads between the Klinë Djakovica road, which runs more or less north-south on this map, and the Pejë-Pristina road, which runs more or less east-west. You want to see the crossroads there. Which means, as we have set out in our brief, that to travel...
Excuse some of us who are slow on the uptake. Which is the Pristina Pejë?
That's the one that runs more or less east-west.
Below Dolac?
Yes, but just below Dolac, and is marked in red. And the north-south Klinë and Djakovica is off the bottom of the map. But again, your honours see that running down through Chupevo and on down through Vraza to the bottom. Now, to travel from Dolac to Gravenica would require crossing at least the Klinë Djakovica road and the Pristina Pejë road at the height of a full-scale Serb offensive. Your honours will also see, in relation to each other in this area, it may just be helpful because sometimes we have to remind ourselves of places that we haven't looked at for quite a while, that Jablanica is down to the southwest of the large blue oval, and just below that, also circled in red, is Jabel. Just again to avoid any confusion, I'm sure your honours remember that the Glodjane that is just above Jablanica is not the Glodjane that has anything to do with Mr. Haradinaj. That's what is sometimes referred to as Catholic Glodjane. Thank you. May we... Oh, and there's one other place which I haven't circled. If your honours just travel from the crossroads up north towards Klinë, you'll see on the left-hand side a small village called Prilipa, P-R-L-I-P-A or N-A? Klinë or Prilipa? The relevance of that place it's Pralina, sorry, P-R-L-I-N-A. Yeah, Pralina. The relevance of that will become clear in a moment. If we could now please have Exhibit P114. Thank you, Luke. And if we could go to the second page, please. Or at least maybe, yeah. Yeah. Your Honours will see the last but one bullet point. MUP, Ministry of the Interior Forces, are currently carrying out a serious operation in the sector of the villages of Gornja Grabanica, Dolovo, Českovo, and Kapuz. They want to know whether VJ Yugoslav Army units would be able to support them if need be. They are deploying their mortars in the Donje Chupevo village sector. Just those points that were highlighted with the blue rectangles so that we can all see what this area refers to.
Can we go to the first page?
Certainly, Your Honours. Oh, and we see that this is Chief of Staff Dragan Stefanovic. And thank you, Your Honour. 20th of May is the date on this.
That's what I wanted to see.
Thank you. And of course, that's the date of this refers to the previous day as well, which is the 19th. So, thank you for that. Now, if we may just pause to reflect now. We can take that from the screen. I don't think we need it anymore. A major offensive is mounted against a number of villages in this area. The three individuals were allegedly taking corn from Dolj to be ground into flour in Grabanica. A map of the region shows Dolj, as you've seen, to the northeast, Grabanica to the southwest of that major intersection. Any route between those two villages would have required them to cross both major roads and go through villages where they would have risked running directly into Serbian attack, being hit by mortar rounds, and all kinds of possibilities which in my submission cannot be excluded in the context of Count 1. Well, no, I'm sorry. It is impossible to rule out a number of alternative scenarios. Very sadly for their families, no bodies have ever been found, but it is a sad fact that in wartime, people do disappear without trace, in the middle, especially in the middle of major offensives.
Can we redact that, Mr. Registrar?
Your Honor, we're back in open session. Thank you.
Thank you. And can we redact just that little?
Thank you. When witness 80 claims that Nasalika was abducted on numerous occasions, the only occasion that bears any factual resemblance to the wrongdoing alleged in paragraph 65 of the indictment is that, according to witness 80, Nasalika was abducted by Haydar Dula in Buchan. Now, that section can only have been drafted on the basis of statements given to the prosecutor by witness 80, who states at paragraph, that section states at paragraph 65 that Nasalika
Your Honor, we're back in open session.
Thank you so much. Yes, Mr. Harvey, I'm sorry for the interruption, but yeah.
Understood, Your Honours. The important point here is that witness 80's testimony was that when, as he said, Nasalika was kidnapped by Haydar Dula in Buchan, other soldiers were there, but he could not remember.
Your Honors, we're back in open session. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Registrar. Yes, Mr. Harvey.
Thank you. Very, very quickly.
Your Honors, we are in open session.
Thank you so much, Mr. Registrar. Yes, Mr. Harvey.
On the question of mens rea, we say that it is highly significant that the detailed minutes of the meetings attended by Lahi Brahimai, Ramush Haradinaj and others on the 21st, 23rd and 24th of June 1998 show no trace of any intention to condone or cover up the commission of war crimes in pursuance of a common purpose of consolidating the total control of the KLA in the Dukagjin zone. They show no evidence of any such intent for any purpose. It was Professor William Shabas who was asked what JCE stands for, and he quipped, "Just convict everyone." Well, that isn't even what the prosecution is asking here. They are saying, it's JCS. Please, just convict somebody. Just convict somebody of something so it doesn't look as if we've gone through all of these months, all of this expense of a start-stop trial, these embarrassingly biased, prejudiced and self-interested witnesses, this farrago of lies and misrepresentations, all this for nothing. It's an embarrassment, but it's not an embarrassment to this tribunal. It's a seductive invitation to credulity against which Dr. Johnson warned. This partial retrial has not been a waste of time. It's not been a waste of money. The love of truth must and shall not be diminished, and this case provides this tribunal with the perfect opportunity to demonstrate to the world that no honest witness will be prevented from testifying, and to demonstrate equally that all testimony will be held up to the strictest scrutiny. Where those who purport to be witnesses, but instead attempt to abuse the protections of this tribunal for their own ends, they and their testimony must and will be found wanting, and Lahi Brahimaj will be found not guilty and will be permitted to continue his studies in law and human rights at Illyria College in Pristina, and to continue to play his part in supporting the rehabilitation of all of the people of Kosovo, the reconstruction and peaceful development of their country under the rule of law. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Harvey. Mr. Rogers.
Your Honours, I don't think I'm going to be able to complete in 10 minutes. I give warning, if I may, of that. I have about 10 points I want to cover. Let me see how quickly I go. I don't know whether Your Honours are able to extend the sitting maybe 15 or 20 minutes to try to conclude.
We must confer with the other people who are intimately affected by that. Pardon, my microphone was off. I was saying we need to confer with the rest of the people who are affected by that request. And I see Mr. Registrar wants to say something. Mr. Registrar informs the chamber that if it's 10 to 15 minutes and the interpreters are happy with it, we can do that, but otherwise we can have another session. If it's going to be longer than that, then there must be a break to give the interpreters a break.
Let me try to get through as much of it as I can,
Go ahead.
and if we need,
Go ahead.
we'll know then how much longer I need. So, Your Honours, moving rapidly to the first point, Mr. Emerson, during his address, suggested that there was no evidence in the trial that Mr. Haradinaj had ever visited the compound in which prisoners at Jablanica were detained. That's at transcript T2818. And that the only evidence is of him visiting the KLA headquarters in the Brahimaj family house inside the village, not the compound where the prisoners were detained. Your Honours, that's not correct. If Your Honours look at the transcript at 2254 to 2361, the witness, protected witness, deals with this in some detail with his description of what the headquarters was. And it's quite clear that he is describing, and he does describe, the buildings with the long building along the wall and the building, second building, described as a type of house in the centre. And at transcript T2382 to 2383, he is more specific and refers to the fact.
So are you able to tell us what this protected witness, by his pseudonym?
It's witness 80.
Your Honours, we're in open session.
Thank you so much. Yes, Mr.
Your Honour,
Rogers.
thank you. The next point relates to Mr. Emerson's assertions relating to the blacklist. And Your Honours will recall that he said that the most important thing about that list was that it wasn't a KLA list at all. And then he referred to a selected part of the evidence of witness 17 in his own cross-examination and accused the prosecution of not having looked at the evidence from the first trial, and then suggested we were trying to mislead you. Your Honours, if you look at the whole of the evidence of witness 17 that was admitted into the record from the first trial, it reveals the following, particularly looking at witness 17, P344, paragraphs 56, 57 and 58. And that is the 92-ter statement of witness 17. I can't hear you. Which is a document under seal. I won't go into it in detail, but you can look at it and see what it says. And particularly a paragraph 58, where it refers to who it was that sought the person's because it was suggested that it was the FARC that were looking for them and not the KLA. But paragraph 58 of that document makes it clear. And when you look then at the testimony of witness 17 P342 at transcript 7584, he refers to who the village commander was, that's Din Krasniki. We know from Chief Krasniki's evidence at P54 paragraph 31 that Din Krasniki was the UCK or KLA commander for Vranoc. That's at paragraph 31 of that exhibit. And he says, does witness 17 at P342 transcript 7584. In fact, just go back to 7583, a bit before. He says, at around 12th July, the operative unit was established in Baran, and we held a meeting at Vranoc with the commander of Lugu I Baranit, as it was called at that time, Din Krasniki, and with certain village commanders whom I didn't know at that time. During this meeting, I was given this list, and I have written in my diary. I've made this entry on the next day, the 13th, when we were inspecting terrain, trying to find the best option for setting up the military premises. So we went to Barony Vogel, and we came to a conclusion that the village school would be the most appropriate place. So what I'm trying to say is that I didn't make up this list, but this list was given to me during the meeting. Question, do you know who this list was given to you by, please? Answer, I don't know, but it is possible that this list was made an entry by a person who was taking the minutes, Din Krasniki or someone else, but I'm not able to tell you exactly who provided the list. Question, can you tell us if it was someone within the KLA who gave you this list? Answer, this was a meeting with a representative of the KLA for the Lugu I Baranit, Din Krasniki and the village commanders. So if you look at it this way, you can well say that these were the persons who had made this list and who had brought it to my attention, end quote. Your Honours, can I...
Sorry, what you have just been reading, is that not under seal? Isn't it what you said?
No.
Okay.
The other bit was. Your Honours, in relation to the third point I wish to make, Mr. Emerson sought to persuade you that after the 23rd of June even, there were separate commands. And you'll recall that he said that we also know from the evidence you've just heard, even after 23rd of June, there was no command relationship of the sort that I have tried to conjure up. And then he played some clips of Tatai and Rex Hematai to try to establish how culturally separate the groups were, and that it wasn't possible for one commander, you'll remember, to march into somebody else's subzone. But what he overlooks to do is to remind you that on the 5th of July, as you have been reminded, 1998, Ramush Haradinaj ordered that Lahi Brahimai be replaced as the commander. That's at P218. And that on the evidence that he did precisely march into Jablanica at the time that it was said that he ordered the release of Skender Kuchi, and that he directed Nazmi Brahimai to release him. So the evidence does show that he was exerting control over what was happening in Jablanica at the time, and it's consistent also with exhibits P204, which is a minute of a direction on the 1st of July 1998 concerning resupply. It's consistent with P211, the 4th of July 98 reprimand issued to Lahi Brahimai, and also to P242 and 248, orders relating to the formation dated the 11th and 12th of July of the brigades, which included the 2nd Brigade and its battalions and commanders, and that brigade was responsible for Jablanica. Your Honours, turning on to my fourth point, Mr. Guy Smith and indeed Mr. Harvey referred to the quote from Colonel Cosland referring to the aims of the KLA as a whole, and takes issue with the matter relating to the murder of the 6 Albanian sympathisers. And they suggest that we have sought to mislead. But only part of the evidence of Colonel Crosland was quoted back to you. And the part of his evidence that is of significance, immediately before the part quoted by Mr. Guy Smith, comes this. It's at P9, it's from the Limai testimony at page 1882. And the question comes, now the 6 bodies that you were found in a forest near Orahovac on the 6th of April, do you know anything about that event? Answer, yes, Your Honours. We were called to Orahovac, which is a town in the middle here. It is actually the centre of the Bayrak and brewing industry, and therefore extremely popular with everyone concerned. Mainly an Albanian town with Serbian businesses in it as well, and throughout the conflict the attitude of most of the businessmen there was that they would wish to get on with making money and distilling their wine and brandy, and for everyone to take their grubby little fight elsewhere, is the way he put it. So it is highly likely that these gentlemen concerned were killed because they were not helping the Albanian cause at the time. And then he was asked, did you see the bodies? He said, we did see the bodies, but there was really no conclusive evidence as to how they came there and who had shot them, and this was part of the fluid situation. So as we submit that the evidence is clear when talking about these events, that certainly from Mr. Crosland's view, that he considered it was highly likely that the persons that killed them were those that were not helping, because they were considered to not be helping the Albanian cause, which is consistent with the comment that he had made earlier. It's a matter for your honours in due course as to how you deal with it.
We certainly will deal with it.
At paragraphs, the defence also raised issue relating to the documents, the UNMIC documents.
We are now into the time of the interpreters.
Yes.
Shall we? Are you sure you're going to do no more than 10 minutes? You've taken 10 to finish 4 points. And I just need to defer to them.
Can we take a short break and deal with it perhaps a little later this afternoon?
A short break.
Because I really haven't got much more.
Well, okay, we'll come back at 2:15 then.
Okay, thank you.
Glodjane.
Your Honours, Your Honours, I'm sorry.
Yes, Mr. Howard.
I hope that I shall be able to stay. Based on the tribunal's timetable, I had planned this morning originally. I had an urgent matter I had to attend to in London, and I had a flight booked. I've now pushed it to as late as possible this afternoon as I can. But if I simply must be in London if at all humanly possible, and I hope nobody would think it discourteous to the tribunal or to Mr. Rogers if I were to leave Mr. Troop in charge in his very capable hands.
Certainly not, sir.
I will try to stay, but I'll
Sure.
speak to him about how long he's going to be.
Fair enough, fair enough. Thank you so much, and you are excused if you have to go.
Thank you kindly.
Thank you so much. Glodjane, 2:15.
All rise, if you leave.